What'd you say?
The best panels are the one you
I ramble, and I will answer any pursuit question you throw at me and just go like,
But this is not your taxidermy class, so no taxidermy questions.
yeah, no, that is true. There is some overlap, but no. I have done a taxidermy class at this con before. I used to, yeah. I used to compete.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did world. I got 2 second places at the world show. That was fun. But
Cool.
anyway, that's.
Cool, congrats. I didn't know you got second place.
I got lots of places, but that's at World. That's a whole.
Yeah.
That's not about this panel.
Yeah.
So personally, I don't tend to do paw patterns that are just 2 pieces, like pancake. Let's say pancake, where it's a top and a bottom. I tend to be the sort of person who likes to have a little bit more 3D body to my paws. So let's see, where's paw? These are my fingers, because I haven't cut them out. My fingers usually end up looking like this.
That's what I saw on mine too.
And this is the part that connects to the hand, and then this is the dart, you trim it, and the claw goes about here, and then you sew the bottom on. And that gives it this. Well, these aren't stuffed or anything, but you can see how it's much more 3D instead of just a flat. Not that that's a problem. It just has to do with the aesthetics you're going for. This is just me. Since this is my panel, I'm doing it the way I do it. There are several ways to skin the cat, and pretty much all of them are right as long as it works out in the end, and it works out in the end fine. You can pass them around if you want. I am totally cool with other people chiming in and stuff, because I know there's going to be some builders lurking around in here. Yes, because his paws are the kind that are up and down.
Oh,
Up and down. Yeah, the pancake style. Can I put them
like
on?
mine.
And yes, yours too. Because you can see how much, I mean, not that it's bad, but you just see how much flatter it is.
Yeah.
But that's such a look. I mean, it depends on what you're looking for entirely. Like, I did a rabbit, and it has more pancake hands because they don't have the huge arched paws. This is for a Doberman. Dogs and cats have really arched toes. Well, a lot of ones have more flat toes, like rabbits.
I did a snow leopard and I thought
Cats and dogs just have such arched feet, and I really like that. I really like that aesthetic, so I try to do it in my pattern. And I'll pass this paw around. It is mostly together. I haven't done the bias tape around the edge. Oh, it's hard to do.
So, question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
If you're looking at your pattern that you've done.
Yes.
That's the top part, I believe.
So,
that's this just flat.
yes, that is exactly these pieces flat.
And then you sew this.
Yes, the tip goes to the tip. The tip goes to the tip, and it's like a beach ball. Beach ball, exactly. You know what a beach ball is made of a bunch of wedges? It's basically 2 finger wedges.
And then there's a third piece for the pattern.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that. Because if you see, this is one that I started putting together that I haven't finished, and I'm not sold on it yet. I saw a bunch of people doing it, so I decided to try it. Instead of doing the palm and the fingers as 1 piece, I see a lot of people making them as 2 pieces. Not sure why. Just decided to try it to see how I liked it. I didn't like it, but I'm doing it right now because that's how it is. And it does give you a little bit more room between the fingers if they're separate pieces. If that makes sense. Like, the seam allowance between the fingers is going to be the thing that trips you up a lot. That's where I always...
That's an issue I've had. I had to where it's like not enough room to go in between, and where it tries to hit the paw pad too.
One way I first do it is try to size up the pattern some more. Like, if you do it the first time and it's really too snugly, bump it up like at least 15 to 20% and see where you're doing that. Because, anyway, brain not working. But yeah, whenever I've tried if this was all 1 piece, because if I part these, you can see how there's more fur between them. And then if it was like if they were overlapping perfectly, and just 1 piece, it'd be like that.
I know what you mean.
You don't
I do.
It depends on the paws. Those ones I'm probably going to put padding in. It depends. I've done a little bit of both. I don't necessarily like lining my paws because it adds a lot of heat and more moisture can get stuck in the paw and they take longer to dry. So I try to put as little padding and stuffing and layers in there as possible because your combs just sweat like... Anyone who's worn a suit knows that everything is sweaty, but some things sweat more than others. And for some reason, for me and my hands, I just have sweaty hands. So I always try to, I'll either only line the top half, not both sides, and stuff them, or add little components. Okay. It just depends on what works better. Anyway, I'm getting tangential. Sorry. But if
It's okay.
Y'all are welcome to come up before I start hacking this up and see the pattern pieces just to see what I'm talking about. Because it's hard to show while everyone's sitting. I'm sorry. We are all limping through this together. That's the wrist of the palm. These are the bottoms of the fingers, and then this is what the bottom of the hand actually looks like all together as one piece.
This would be good if you wanted like multi-foot fingers though.
Oh yeah, no, I was trying. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why. Yeah. Here. These are not fully appliqued yet because I was going to show that, but they are so. Now, some variant thereof for cats and dogs, depending on what I need. Like I said, that one it's a little sad because it's not stuffed, but they're cool though. But what was I gonna say? Right. So what I usually do first is attack the paw pads. Now I'm gonna pass this around in a little bit, but with my pattern piece, I actually cut out the palm pad, and I only use. Where are you, my friend? Silver Sharpie. Someone, I think it's Matrices, who has a wonderful website called matrices.net with every kind of tutorial you could humanly want on it. Did a bunch of testing and found out these metal Sharpies don't seem to run. Normal Sharpies can run with the right thing, and so can a lot of other things. And I used to use fabric chalk and fabric pins.
I use chalk.
Yeah, well, you know how though it likes to break. It doesn't always do a clean line. These things are magic. And so I use it all the time. And I always trace out my paw pattern. And when I'm ready, and I don't have my pleather, unfortunately, because I forgot it, because it's that kind of weekend. But we're just going to make do with what we have, as you do with Pursuit. And I'm going to use this. This is a neoprene scuba. I usually use it for claws and noses, but it'll work for a paw pad too, actually. It's called scuba. Scuba. Like scuba diving.
Is that what they make the sea powder?
Neoprene?
It's a type of neoprene, but like on Big Z and stuff, and at Joann's, they just call it scuba.
I actually use.
I don't think it's like the nice stuff that they make real scuba stuff out of. This is more like the bootleg stuff.
It's thin.
Yeah.
Some people use that to make carbide stuff out of.
I can believe it. But usually I use pleather. I have used this for paw pads before. It's just, I prefer pleather just because it's more, where I want.
Patty.
Sturdy for me. I am a mean person to my costume, and if I cannot like scrub it against something and it doesn't die, I'm probably going to kill it.
Yeah.
But usually, so I have my palm, I have my fursuit pad drawn out. I don't even worry about anything. I just slap it onto my fabric. And where are my pins? I don't care. It's just a piece of fabric that will cover it. I don't worry about cutting it. I don't worry about shaving it. I don't worry about anything. I just pin that sucker directly to that sucker and sew it on. Because if you used to, in the old days, you would trim them and try to sew it like that, but it likes to squirrel, it likes to wrinkle, it likes to be a dum-dum. It does not matter. Some way it's going to find a wrinkle. And so
Which side do you
It's
turn on?
example that she's passing around.
I turn the side that I can see my lines on. Because that's when I drew it on the back of the backing.
Okay.
So I can carry, because if you sew from the front, you're not sure where the fur is going. Like, basically, I just try to take out as much possibility as that the fabric's going to shift, or the fur is going to shift.
I just know some people are really picky about like how the understitch looks, but I imagine the fur probably hides that anyway.
Well, I do the stitching around the edge, and then I applique over it,
Okay.
and I get to that. That's what I tend to do.
I know what applique is.
So I neaten it up that way, but it also is a handmade item, so there's going to be some idiosyncrasies anyway. Now, if you had a lovely embroidery machine, I wish I could. Oh, yeah. So let's see. Oh, yeah. I desperately wish that I could do it, and maybe someday, but not today. Is not that day. So you are gonna watch me wipe them things real fast. I'm sorry. That's why I did some of these, because I realized very quickly if I was to do a single paw and handle, it would take more than an hour.
Oh god.
Because between things not working and things working and the machine vomiting, so I was like, we're gonna do a slightly abbreviated version that hits the high points that people tend to hiccup on. Because appliquing is a thing.
Yeah, it is.
Even my machine has intense feelings about doing these things. I took a picture of the settings that worked, and it's on my phone, and I refer to that picture every time I want to set it back to that.
You have to like turn the tension down.
You have to turn the tension, and then you have to, I set it on zigzag, and then you have to figure out the width.
You're on the right foot.
Yes,
What breeds fur is
that is a seal, or beaver.
that?
They're slightly different furs, but generally the length is the same. as because you always have to check, but yeah, because this is usually called a bunny or something, or a teddy fur, that length, and then this is usually a seal or a beaver of that sort. Both these furs are from Big C. They're short, shag, and they're I can't remember what they call it. It may be called their super seal or something. I don't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, so on pleather, I don't usually pin on the inside because I don't want to have pin marks all inside of it. So I just pin really well around the edge. And since this is not pleather, I can get away with pinning on the inside.
On the inside of the pattern?
I try on pleather, I would only usually pin around the edge because I don't want to have a bunch of pinholes in the middle. But since this is the scuba, right, I can pin in the middle and not worry about it. And it's fairly, it's smooth enough. You don't have to, basically, it works out. Because the fur pads it out a little bit. As long as you don't have any, like, previous buckles or bulks, I've had good luck. But I also am more than willing to fudge things and just make it work. So this is a little bit of, I'm a belligerent maker who watches my machine do my knitting.
And I see you have a walking foot on that.
I do. I actually use that for other things, but I just am too lazy to ever change my foot. But a walking foot is nice. That is a good call, because most people don't know what it is. This huge thing is a walking foot, and so if you know anything about the anatomy of a sewing machine, they have the little metal bits underneath that look all sharp and pointy that drag the fabric under. Those are called feed dogs. It's a great name. But the feed dogs only pull the bottom layer of fabric. So you have 2 layers of fabric. Sometimes the top layer isn't being pulled at the same rate because it's slicker, it's scratchier, it has feelings, it doesn't want to go. And so it'll pull your stitch, and so the bottom will get pulled faster, and it'll cause a twist in your stitching.
Oh,
and make it
I've had
swirl
that
around.
happen.
A walking foot adds feed dogs to the top. So that it has feed dogs on top and bottom to grip the fabric and pull it along together.
Can you do zigzag stitches?
I have.
Okay.
So whether or not you're supposed to is another matter entirely. But I try to muck with the machine as little as humanly possible. So I usually start on the bottom of the paw pad because, well, by bottom I mean the bottommost end. Because always the beginning and the end is sometimes where you get a couple of thread dinglies, and that's when the fur will cover them. Not to say that it's ugly, it's just if anywhere is going to have thread dinglies you need to trim off, I try to do it right there, as opposed to like at the very tip. But I line up my paw pad pattern I traced on the back of my fabric, and I'm sorry, I'm sitting here and y'all are sitting down and can't see. Let's see, I got the settings, normal, normal, normal. Let's see if we're gonna vomit. And I tend to do a wide stitch on the first pass because if I screw up, I want to be able to rip it out easily. And also, I don't want to burn a bunch of, because I'm going to be appliqué. Yeah, this one has it. I'm going to be appliquéing over it anyway. So if it's a little more spaced out and not as a tight stitch, it's not a big deal.
It's
Since
just
I'm
a holding stitch.
yeah, it's basically there to say you have to live here, stay. Basically. So let me stitch this paw pad on. You're welcome to come see. I just gotta do the thing, and I can't make it go any faster than me.
You're fine. Go ahead.
So with the walking foot, can it fit on any brother machine?
Usually they seem to be slightly model specific. I had to look up one for my machine.
Because I have a brother as well, so.
This
I
is
think mine is newer than
this
yours.
is totally a bootleg walking foot that I got off
Okay.
Etsy from a random person because this machine is so old and cantankerous. I
It's
keep
out of
waiting for it to
stock.
die. No,
Oh,
I keep
okay.
waiting for this machine to die, so I didn't want to invest more money in it unless I had to.
Gotcha.
Old Sears, what? Technically, Brother does sell a foot for this. But you can see if y'all come up at some
Yeah,
point, you can
the
see how the
walking
walking
foot.
dogs do
I
their,
have
well, the
one.
top dogs do their thing.
one. It is older than
And I do not stress about getting absolutely perfect because again, as long as I'm right near my line, I'm gonna applique over it. So perfection is not high up on my
so it
list.
was both.
I mean, I don't want it to be like sloppy and gappy and everywhere, but as long as it's generally on my line, I'm happy. Now, if you want to stuff your paw pads, because some people are in, like if you're using Minky for your paw pads or the mochi fabric or something, There are two ways to go about that. One way, you could technically leave a tiny hole and use a chopstick or something and shove a bunch of padding in there. The way that I tend to like it better because I have more control over it and can have my clean edges, I cut a tiny hole in the backing and just shove it in and then stitch it shut. So you can go either way, but that's my preference, is to make just a tiny little hole in the back before I sew it all together, stuff that sucker full, and then stitch it shut. You could do it, like leave the tiny hole, stuff it, and then applique it, but I find appliquing very hard if the plaids have any more body to them than fur, basically.
So then you cut through the back piece, the one that's going to be on the inside of the paw?
Are we talking about like
The brown.
Yeah, I cut whenever I stuff. Usually, I cut a tiny hole. I mean,
In the brown.
It can't be wider than my pinky nail because you ball up a little bit of stuffing, put it on a chopstick, and shove it in there.
Yep.
So you don't really need
It's
much
going to be
room
on
for
the
that.
inside of the paw anyway, though.
Yeah, and it's just adding a little bit of 3D. If it's stretchy material, pleather doesn't have enough stretch to really validate doing. I mean, you can, but pleather doesn't typically stretch enough to show that you even did that. But like your paws are like a minky type fabric, and yeah, those stretchy fabrics tend to showcase that you actually put in the effort to stuff them.
Just making sure you know about the little hole in it. Okay.
Paws always have holes in them. It's just the nature of the beast. They're such a high active wear use item that. Well, I tend to get holes between my fingers, even though it's all machine sewn. It's just something about how much you use your hands and how much you abuse them. Please don't. Yeah, I know, that's the bad sound. That noise was the sound. That was the sound of the bobbin having feelings, and it needs to just push them really deep down, deep inside.
Mine does that too.
Well, I'm waiting for the inevitable. Eventually, mine likes to do the bird nests, where the bobbin just vomits masses and mounds of thread.
And it does that whole sound.
And I always go back just a little bit every time because my mama yelled at me too much about that.
Yeah. I'm the same way.
Watch the threads.
Exactly. Well, it saves your butt just a little bit in case you have to do anything. There we go. Oh my God, look at the bird nest. It was lying. It was a liar machine. It acted like it was happy and it lied. But you know what's great? I can still demonstrate on this one because I have a bunch of pretty paw pads to applique in a moment. That is wonderful. What is it? Oh, that's really cute. I like your tail.
She said she wants to try to make her first fursuit next year. So
Oh, yeah. Hey, you got it. I started really young. Let me try again and see what Mr. Bobbin is doing. Sewing machines are 1 part magic and 2 part angry.
Fueled by fight.
They are. Like, if a fursuit doesn't draw blood, it's not a real fursuit. I'm teasing, it is, but my gosh, I swear everything I've ever touched wants to eat me.
You have to poke yourself at least 5 times with pins, or you're not sewing right.
I had the wonderful luck of poking myself with a pin, and then, I cut myself with something else, and then I poked a pin into the same hole.
Oh, no.
I love that. Let me make sure she is maybe unhappy or happy with me, because I didn't have a scratch. Nope, you're not happy at all. Nope. I was stressing about this on Wednesday. It was throwing an absolute fit, so there's like a 50% chance where it wasn't going to work at all, and I was going to hand sew a pair of paws in front of me.
Oh no.
I'm really fast at hand sewing. It's actually not that bad.
How does that work instead of compared to with the machine?
That is perfect. You can do all sorts of things if you know how to hand sew.
These are hand sewn.
There's some things you still just have to hand sew.
Basically, you just.
Yeah, you just do your
I
route.
was
I
Okay.
don't have a sewing machine yet.
Okay.
I was replacing
Yeah, those
some
are all
fur
hand
on
sewn.
my suit. My suit's 5 years. You're working now.
Huh. Okay.
As soon as I touch his fur, it probably will vomit again.
Yep.
So these are extra.
Mine are all one piece.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you keep like a can
That,
of air?
like what she said, the pancake style?
Yeah, that's the pancake.
So, okay.
No, it's lucky. I think
It's just two
I've never
pieces.
oiled it,
Yeah.
not once. I have every time I've cracked it open, I
That's
do
fair.
take the vacuum to it and vacuum out any of the badness, which there is a lot.
Yeah, I don't bother oiling.
Especially with fur.
honestly, if this was probably a nice machine, I would care more, but I have abused and neglected it so thoroughly. It's kind of like the old car you're afraid to wash because it might fall apart if you look at it for me.
And it refuses to die.
Yes, precisely. So let's try this one more time now that she's maybe purring or hissing quietly on the inside. So that is why I brought extras, because I had a suspicion it was going to be cantankerous.
So you're still prepared to hand sew it?
I cannot hand sew paw pads because there's no way to get that applique look that way. I mean, there is, but
It's extremely
that
tedious.
is a terrifying prospect. But actually, hand sewing paw pads, I mean, I still sometimes hand sew parts on paws just because it's too tight for my machine to get into. And hand sewing is completely valid if you just do it snugly. And I use upholstery thread because I'm crazy. I love upholstery thread. Not for general sewing because I'm pretty
Is that
sure.
why your machine cries? The thread is too thick?
Nope, I use a Guterman's polyester thread. I love it. It's $8 a spool, and you get 1,000 meters in it.
That's expensive.
It's worth it. It doesn't snap that often. It behaves mostly.
Yeah, cotton snaps really easy.
Yeah, this is a polyester based one. Come on, my baby. Please don't make me feel silly in front of my panel people. I know. Judge the machine, not me.
That's exactly why it doesn't want to work.
It's like I can feel the eyeballs on me, and I do not like it. I would wish to be home in my private place. I wish to be home in my private place.
Give me a reason to invest money for her to get a new sewing machine.
We're working. So many times it won't do the horrible bobbin noise, which it did earlier, because that's the warning. That's the warning bad things are happening underneath. Anyone who's sewn with a machine, as soon as you start hearing that bobbin make that horrible swirling noise,
Been there.
Noises yourself.
I have on more than one occasion knocked this machine fiercely to the side. No remorse. I basically slapped it. It deserves to be angry at me. It's working right now though. I'm holding my breath a little bit. I have all these eyeballs on me while I sew. Okay. If it doesn't work, we're going to still head forward because she has feelings.
She needs to go to a
And
sewing
honestly,
therapist.
doing smooth curves and stuff just comes with time. There's no real secret to, because when I first started, my curves were kind of janky, and every once in a while, I still kind of have a slightly janky curve, but it's always hidden with the applique, so I'm like, I'll rip it up if I really don't like it, but it just depends on the, what is it, risk versus reward. If it's too terrible, I just rip it up. If it's not too terrible and it's workable,
Move it forward anyway.
well, thankfully, this is a demo pair, so slight jankiness is fine because I'm not going to finish these. Yay! This is sufficient. So it's still angry. We're not going to talk about the angry one up top. The angry one up top is a big example of what not to do. Much better. So you can see the angry one where my machine had opinions about doing anything, and then the bottom one, which it looks much nicer and cleaner. Because, I mean, back in the old days, I used to cut out the paw pad and then try to sew around the edge, and that was just badness. There's nothing good coming of that. That's just so much time and energy. So wasting a little bit of material and just pinning the material to the underside, like, for these, this entire thing had, like, just a huge piece of pleather, and I didn't cut these out. These are so small and squirrely, I actually did all of these at once, with just a big piece of pleather.
Also helps to keep the material stay put.
The bigger piece of material is much easier to handle than the smaller squirrely pieces. So that's why this is 2 pieces. Is that I much prefer something this size to be rotating it and behaving than something like, I mean, one of these fingers is this big, and trying to do that and rotate it and have the foot not suck the fur up or the edge of the fur up and pull it in.
Or bird nest.
Or bird nest. So typically for like appliquing paw pads and palms, I try to leave it not too big, because if it's too big, it starts hitting this and you have to start curling it. I get that, and I don't like it. But I try to keep it in about the size of, I don't know what this part of the machine's called, but I'm going to call it my stage right now, because that sounds fancy. So
I think it actually is called a stage.
I can believe that. So if this was leather, I actually use a box cutter to cut the fabric. away.
What about the pizza cutter things that they sell? The quilting ones?
I only worry because that doesn't feel as agile to me. 'Cause it's a rolly blade. With this, I can make me a tiny point. And this isn't pleather, but I'll hold it down and I'll just drag it. This is too soft for this, but I'll just drag it like maybe like 2 centimeters away from my seam line.
Okay.
Because let's see, does anything have any on it? But yeah, that's what these are. I'll pass them around. Some of them are a little special, but they'll be covered with applique, so it doesn't matter. And I'll cut right up against that seam line. Now with something this soft, you can use snips, but for pleather, I found, for pleather or stiffer paw pad fabrics, I love using a box cutter. Just do not let it bite you. It will bite you, and you don't want it to bite you. It's not a love bite.
It'll cut quick.
Yeah, it will hurt and you will bleed fast. I know. That's why that one came from. Hey.
But hey, at least you know it's real fursuit, right?
It has a little button. I'm going to pass these around because these show. This is unpicked. These are just roughly shorn. Some of these I'll trim up a little bit more with my snips. But you can see how the edge, and I cut the pleather right along the edge. She'll have to help you with this one, I think. But for these, since this is the scuba material, I almost exclusively, I can't preach these enough, I use spring-loaded scissors. These are Friskers. They are not that expensive on Amazon. They will save your hands on foam and everything else. But truth be said, they will bite you. So if your finger is too close, you'll get a fun pinch. But otherwise, I love these scissors. I buy these almost every year and just throw away the old ones because I brutalize them violently. So they're not that expensive. And then, so for this, I'll just nip it. I love the little ones. Nope, that's the old pair. My bias taping a little bit. Yeah, because this is the thread I use. It's the huge rolls of Gutermann's polyester. And then for hand sewing, I pretty much exclusively use Coats and Clark upholstery thread. This will cut you before it breaks. Do not try to break this like you do normal thread if you're too lazy to snip it. Do not. It will cut you. And I'll pass these around, just because. Well, it's interesting seeing the two different types of thread and how different they are. Because one is much coarser and kind of almost like a fishing line texture to it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Now, I hesitate sewing a lot with the upholstery thread because, truthfully, I'm pretty sure that will rip the backing of your fur before it will give. And if your fursuit's going to do full stupid, you'd rather it pop the seam open than ripping the fur.
Yeah.
So, in the grand scheme of things, at one point I did try sewing a fursuit with it, and it was not a good idea. My machine was beyond angry. Little snips.
Paddle, I got a question.
Shoot!
Do you ever encounter an issue when you're using the pleather? Because I've had this happen trying to do paw pads. When you place the pleather onto the stage, do you find it getting caught? As in, it's not slick enough, so it'll kind of catch against the plastic.
I haven't had that happen, but when I did have a fabric that was big, I was using some stretch rubbery pleather stuff for a costume. Wax paper.
Okay, that's what I had heard.
It depends on what you're sewing, but if you have something that wants to stick to your foot or your stage, I've actually taken strips of wax paper and put it between my foot and the fabric. Because they do sell Teflon feet for that sort of thing, but I don't have enough of a problem to really, I haven't bothered, and also there's some wax paper. If I have a little bit of a problem, it's like, let's go get some wax paper instead of buying another machine foot. So, and then the wax paper, it gets perforated when you sew it, so you pretty much just rip it like a piece of paper in your composition book. So, I never had it stick to this part of the machine, but the foot, for some odd reason, every once in a while, I'll have something that wants to stick. I might not fight with cutting this too much because it is angy, but yes. Do we have any other questions that I can help while I'm playing around over here?
No, not really.
Questions.
How's your day been?
I'm still hungry, but that's pretty much my default at cons. I'm pretty sure I talk so much and I yell so much that I'm just like, you're burning through energy. I am. I went up to the room after the dealers didn't close and hid for like an hour. I say hid in a nice way. I just was like sitting and decompressing and eating spinach dip while dealing. I did want some pizza, but I was hiding.
At least you're not sticky this time.
What was the sticky thing happening?
You were sitting and we were waiting for somebody to show up for a panel, and you went to drink
I
soda and spilled soda on the
Right
outside.
now. I've learned my lesson.
You spilled soda on the outside of your suit, and then you tried to drink it and spilled it on the inside of your suit.
Oh no.
So she spills it on the outside. She says, "Now I'm sticky."
Well,
And then she goes, she stuffs this can in the mouth.
Before I came, so it's definitely not sticky.
Yeah. But then she shoves the can in her mouth and goes like this and swirls it down the inside. She goes, "Now I'm sticky on the inside."
Oh no.
So I passed the paw pads around. I don't know where they are right now. They're somewhere. Okay, we can continue going around. So this is with the pleather, not the pleather, the scuba. And I'm not gonna do the whole thing because this is just a random pair. It takes more effort and more time, and you're already. Technically, I think we're over, but I don't care. I'm gonna be in here until
No,
8:30. 8:30, cool. I'm gonna pass these around, but it gives you an idea of like, it's not perfect, but we can applique over that to make it all neat and pretty.
Yeah, you have 30 minutes still.
I love making furries. I know, right?
There's a difference?
So,
Yeah, because not all furries have fursuits.
I'm
Exactly.
gonna cut out some fingies while we talk. Now, a lot of people use a box cutter to cut fur. I'm garbage at that. Just wholesale, I don't get along with it. It works for some people, not for me.
I use
Doesn't make
my
it any
Exacto
less valid. But they'll make it short and they'll just drag it across the back so they don't cut the fibers. I'm okay with it if it's a straight line. I don't have much of a problem. But if it's a curve, my curve just starts doing like a hack dance. And
Yeah.
Jagged.
I use an Exacto blade.
Well, I use these for the curves because they're so small and so short. I can get between the pile and the backing. Because if you do the big cuts, it just cuts the whole fur and you get that like.
Then you get fur going poof.
Well, it's not even that. It cuts like this overhead aim. This overhanging edge is really important because if you just cut it, you get that hard edge there, and you'll never get that back because it's not real fur. So whenever you cut fur, you always really want to endeavor to get between the backing and the fibers and not cut that edge, so you always have that overhang. Does that make any sense? This is really
Yes.
Yes.
like, yeah, I can. Like, you see how the fibers are all cut right here? That'll make it whenever you sew it, you'll have like a little gap. If you cut behind and make sure you get really close between the fibers and the backing.
Ooh, I like
Just part
this.
the fibers when you
I do
cut,
too.
you know,
I think I'll make my paw like that. With
I'm just trying
scuba.
to keep the
Yeah,
tip of the blade
I may actually go that
close
route
to the
myself.
backing. It's like,
Yeah.
it's pretty
I'll have
much
to, once the thing is over, I'll have to see what's the site.
like well, kind of. You know, it's hard to do it because I'm used to doing it on my finger. Well, you can cut this way too. It doesn't matter. It's more about not doing like this business, like not doing big, huge cuts, because then you made that hard edge and you're never getting that back.
And then you get the seasoning that never gets out.
I always call it new fursuit syndrome, and it's just when you have a new fursuit, it's going to poop fur everywhere for like years.
We call it the seasoning at the house. It's like when you get a suit,
Okay, I'm picking up
make
those.
sure the seasoning gets in everything.